This is the We Get Outdoors podcast. My name is Rob Yates. I am your host, and welcome to this episode where we get to know Ryan Pyle. Ryan is best known for his BBC Earth and Amazon Prime TV series Extreme Treks and his Travel Channel TV series Tough Rides. Ryan's a highly accomplished storyteller and inspirational adventurer, having achieved more in the last 20 years than most do in several lifetimes. In this interview, we get to learn how a young journalist can leave his home country of Canada and move halfway around the world to live in China. Ryan talks about his passion for storytelling and photography and how he's converted that into a career where he brings the world places where nobody else has really ventured and brings it into our living rooms through our TVs. Along the way, Ryan has achieved a Guinness World Record for adventure motorbike riding, involving him circumnavigating the huge country that's China, and has climbed 3 of the world's highest peaks. I'm super excited to share this interview with Ryan with you and hope you can take massive inspiration to have your own extreme treks and tough rides. This episode is brought to you by the We Get Outdoors tribe, where your next adventure is just one click away. You can join this, the fastest growing outdoor group on planet Earth, and become part of a tribe of like-minded outdoor enthusiasts, sharing your adventures, their adventures, trips and insights, and helping to ensure you plan and have the most perfect adventures. Click on the link in the description below to join for free right now. So, Mr. Ryan Pyle, welcome to We Get Outdoors. Originally from Toronto, Canada, currently in Dubai. How does that work?
How does that work? I've been living abroad since I was out of university. Living abroad is now the new normal.
The new norm seems to have started off with a passion for China or Asia. When and where does that all come from?
So I grew up as a student athlete. I grew up playing basketball from a very young age in Toronto, Canada, and I went to the University of Toronto and played Division I basketball at university. I also played some rugby, which was wonderful. And I think the thing is, when you grow up as a high performance athlete and you play it at a high level, you don't end up being a very well rounded person. Your friends are all athletes, and you don't have a lot of interests outside of sport because you just don't have any energy because you're training and playing and traveling all the time. So for me, it was kind of as my basketball career started to end, and as I started to look for other things to do, and traveling and exploring the world became really my saving grace, because I was quite sad with not being able to carry on and play sport. I didn't get injured or anything like that. I just wasn't good enough to carry forward. So it was really the traveling and exploring and writing and photography that kind of became my next passion.
Why China in particular?
Well, China was very interesting, and I had taken a few courses on Asian history in China when I was in university, and I was just fascinated by this country of 1 billion people that no one really seemed to know anything about. And this was kind of in the late 90s when I was at school in university and starting to read about China. And it just seemed like, the place to go if you were an adventurer. It kind of seemed like the place to go if you wanted to be on the edge of the great opening of this country, and that's what I did, and I was able to work with people like the New York Times and Time Magazine, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, Financial Times, all the big kind of English language publications around the world to document China and its growth and its development from really 2002 all the way up till 2010 or 11.
Wow. And what do you take from all that? I mean, China's the last frontier, as you say, really, in the world. It's the place that nobody, the West doesn't really understand or know about. What do you take away from China's growth and where it's going to? What are they up to? What fascinates you?
Well, I was very, well, first of all, I think there's parts of Africa and Central Asia that, and South America that are equally mysterious and kind of untouched in a way of storytelling as well. But with China, it was just happening on such a vast scale, and it was happening so quickly. And because it was the workshop of the world, and because they had 1 billion consumers, it was topical and it was in the news. It was easier to work in China as a freelance photographer and a freelance writer because people wanted, information about China all the time. So, so that was great. And the Chinese people and the Chinese government had great ambitions. I mean, what they've done in the last 30 years. Is absolutely remarkable, pulling 800 million people out of literally abject poverty, creating a middle class, building cities that are international financial centers, and all of this. I mean, I think we're in a bit of a dark period at the moment with regards to China's relationship with the rest of the world and China's relations with the United States. But it didn't sour my passion for exploring and telling stories about the country when I was there.
Mm. And so did what? So you went to China, photography and storytelling, and then mountains and motorbikes seem to appear into your past story and future story as well. Um, which one's which? Which one's your favorite? Have you always biked or climbed, or when did you take up that stuff?
So it was really about me being like a photojournalist or photographer for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and all these folks, and then looking to spend my downtime or spend my vacation time doing fun stuff in China. And that led me to writing travel stories and doing photography work about trekking in the mountains of Tibet, or climbing in the mountains of Tibet, or riding motorcycles along the dirt roads of Sichuanbana, which is this southwestern region of China that borders along with Myanmar. And and as I kind of started to feel my photography career was coming to an end, and I wanted to try to tell bigger stories and more complicated stories, I decided I wanted to make television shows. And then when I started to make television shows, I really wanted to bring in these trekking and climbing and motorcycle passions that I had into my next phase of work. And that started really in 2010. Um, I rode a motorcycle the whole way around China. We did 19,000 kilometers in 65 days. We set a Guinness World Record for the longest motorcycle trip in one country. And we made a 6-part TV show called Tough Rides China, which is on Vimeo and Amazon Prime and iTunes and all that kind of stuff. And originally it was on Travel Channel. And then basically that kind of launched my television career. And we did another motorcycle trip in India, which was very hard. India is a wonderful country with beautiful people, but terrible roads and terrible traffic. So that was tough. And then we did one in Brazil. So we did a big motorcycle trip in Brazil, 14,000 kilometers in 60 days, and went all through the Amazon and stuff like that. And that was amazing. It was a dream come true. And I'll actually do maybe 1 or 2 more Tough Ride shows next year to continue the series.
Where's next on the bucket list of places to go and take your bike to?
Yeah, we're looking at a few places. Russia is definitely on my list, as I want to continue exploring big parts of the world, and so we'll see, and maybe even South Africa, the South African states, looking at maybe Namibia, maybe something on the West Coast. I'm not sure. We're still in talks to do these kinds of things, but I'm really excited about getting back into that series, because what happened to me is the motorcycle shows were going very well, but I kind of didn't want to get pigeonholed into just doing motorcycle shows, because I really like doing a lot of different things, and I loved climbing and trekking and camping and being outside. So when my motorcycle shows were going well, that's when I took the opportunity to make my first extreme trek series, which was in Tibet, where we trekked around 4 sacred mountains in Tibet. And then that was kind of successful. And then I took that global. So we the second season we were in like Tanzania, Morocco, China, the USA, Peru, Italy, Nepal, Oman, and then season 3, which is coming out right now on BBC Earth, might even be in South Africa actually. We were in Russia, Iceland, Laos, Papua New Guinea, Bolivia, Argentina, Jordan, and Uganda, and we're just preparing for season 4, which will broadcast, which will go into production on next year.
Yeah, I was seeing you've got 4 new series coming out next year on your website at this point in time. I just wonder, what I can find my words. What qualifies as an extreme trek? How do you choose it?
I think with the TV show Extreme Trek, we're looking to do epic overland journeys, and we want to definitely do things where we're using our feet, and we're open to to walking through jungles. We're open to walking across deserts, and we're open to climbing high mountains, and doing really high mountains. Like in one episode, we climbed Aconcagua in Argentina, which is 7,000 meters, the highest mountain in South America. We did Elbrus, which is the highest mountain in Europe, at about 5,600 meters. So we're okay doing the alpinism stuff, but we're also storytellers. So in season 2 of Extreme Treks, we went to Italy and we rock climbed and did the Via Ferrata, and retraced the steps of World War I soldiers that were where they were battling between Italy and Austria, and they were actually fighting on the Via Ferrata, fighting in those mountains in the Dolomites near Cortina. So when we can involve a great outdoor adventure and a great trek or a great climb with some history as well, then we always try to do that. In season 3, we did one episode in Papua New Guinea along the Kokoda Trail, which was a famous battleground between the Australians and the Japanese soldiers in World War II.
Wow. Now, the countries you're dropping in, most of them, other than maybe Italy, they all have certain reputations for a degree of hostility, hardness to travel in, conflict against each other. I mean, you've already mentioned Nepal, China, and Tibet. There's 3, and India. There's 4 places that are quite good at squabbling with each other around territory. How do you navigate your way around all of that to go and produce a TV series at the end of it?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of you try to get as many permissions as you can before you go. You try to find good people who are local, who have worked in film and television before, to help you navigate the situations on the ground, and then yeah, you just want to go. And I think the thing that really excites me is wanting to go to countries that people maybe don't have the chance to go to, or maybe don't have don't have like a full perception of, and the idea that we could go to a country and do a trip. Like we did one episode where we walked across the Taklamakan Desert in northwestern China, and we did about 120 kilometers of just straight desert, and it was roofless. But a lot of people watched that episode and they commented on it and they said, "Oh, I had no idea China had deserts." And I think that's great, because someone just learned something about China. So I really like kind of going off and doing these great trips, and also kind of keeping the educational element of it all.
What's been the most butt clenching moment of all of these trips for you so far?
The most butt clenching moment, I think that's a good one. I think for me personally, the jungle trips are the worst, just because I really suffer with bugs. Bugs just eat me and attack me, and it doesn't matter how much bug spray I have on, and I just get bitten all the time, and that really drives me crazy. And I know that doesn't sound like a big adventurer thing to say or a big manly thing to say, but it really does kill me. But I think the most butt clenching moment for me was are the early mornings on the high mountains when you make your summit push. I think that's, I think anyone who's a mountaineer or interested in alpinism, that's really just the most exciting moment. And, you wake up at midnight or you wake up at 2 a.m. and you got your crampons on, you got your headlamp on, you got your ice axe in your hand. It's pitch black outside. You can see the moon and the stars, and and then you just start climbing, and climbing in the dark for the first 3 or 4 hours before the sun hits is just, it's beautiful and terrifying altogether. And it's kind of the most butt clenching moment for me, because you just don't know if you're going to make it, because if you can make it till sunrise, you're probably going to make it. But it's those first few hours in the dark where it's freezing cold and the wind is up, and then when the sun comes out, it's like a different mountain. If the sun comes up, if you're lucky enough to get good weather, everything kind of changes and becomes a lot more positive. So those were always kind of, a little bit scary moments for me, because we're making a production too. I mean, I've been really lucky. We've made 20 episodes of Extreme Treks now. We've done 8 episodes of Expedition Asia for Discovery Channel. We've done all the motorcycle trips. Like, we've never not done what we set out to do. So we're on a bit of a streak. So it would be terrible if we had to turn around it at some stage.
Yeah, because not only have you got the safety of yourself to consider, you've got a safety of people. I'm going to say a whole crew, but I would imagine at close to 7,000 meters, the crew's pretty small. You've got to keep all those people happy and safe, and produce a product, as well as just do what a lot of people would consider near on impossible, which is get to the summit yourself.
Right. Yeah. And these are places where people, not only don't make it to the top, but, in some cases lose their lives. I mean, we were at Aconcagua, and when we were there, there were people who had died on the mountain the same week we were there. So these things are, they're real. The consequences are real. The situations are very serious.
Is that what attracts you to them?
No, actually, I really don't. I don't get very excited about like near-death experiences. I don't feel like I need to push myself to my absolute limit. I love going to beautiful places, and I love being able to tell stories about them in a meaningful way and share that story with the widest audience possible. And, at Aconcagua, it's not the highest mountain in the world. It's the highest mountain in South America. It's one of the 7 highest summits on 7 continents. And that's very exciting. And it's a little feather in your cap if you want to collect those kinds of feathers. But we didn't go to the highest mountain in the world. But I really liked Aconcagua. I really liked Argentina. I found a very interesting guide there who was very accomplished, and he, all of my Extreme Trek shows, it includes me and a guide, and we become friends, and we also learn about the guide and the guide's story. And my guide at Aconcagua, his name was Max. He has also set a Guinness World Record for climbing the most 6,000 meter peaks in the world.
Wow.
He has, he just summited K2 this summer. He summited Aconcagua like 30 times, and he was my guide, and he was also on camera with me, and his story was beautiful. And I just really liked him, and I thought that the two of us would make a really good team on on the episode. So we went to Aconcagua. So that's what really drives me.
Okay, cool. How do you I'll come back onto what's really drives you in a second, but I'm curious, how do you cope with the altitude when you're up there?
Oh, it's experience. I think, everyone reacts to altitude totally differently. Everyone's body is kind of built totally differently. But in my personal experience, it does come with, just being comfortable. I think the mind does control the body, and when you start to feel yourself hyperventilating, or you start to feel yourself get dehydrated, you need to know what to do to kind of reverse those trends, so that you can continue to perform or continue to feel comfortable at altitude. So I think it's a lot about body awareness, and a lot about not overreacting, and maintaining your composure. Because I think if you overreact and you don't maintain your composure, and then of course you don't understand what's going on in your body, then by the time you're dehydrated, you already are going to have a headache, and you're already probably going to be too far along to recover, and then you're going to put yourself in a dangerous situation. So I think that early warning signs are really important, and I've learned this over many years, even when I was trekking in Tibet. Without the video cameras, when I was just with my friends and things like that, when we were up at 5,000 or 6,000 meters, learning how to cope with those things was an important learning process. And I think it's fair to say too, like, not all of the Extreme Treks series are all about being up at high altitude. I mean, we were we were, we were at sea level for most of our, for some of our journeys. And in the Wadi Rum, we filmed an episode, which is in Jordan. I think the Wadi Rum part of it is, right at sea level. It was just roasting hot in that desert. So we like to try to find, extreme doesn't necessarily mean altitude. We just want to find, beautiful, epic, amazing locations that also present some unique challenges.
Mm. And it's interesting that you mentioned self-awareness as that magic switch for helping yourself at altitude and recognizing what's going on. Because I think I've guided across every continent apart from Antarctica, and with clients, getting them to switch onto their own body and feel what's going on about them and understand what the cause and effect is and what they need to do to help themselves is really hard. I think people have become quite sanitized to not listening to their body. And it probably bites them often in the outdoors, I think.
Oh, I think it does for sure. And I mean, think about it though. I mean, in the city, you can wake up in the morning and go to work and then work all day and not drink one glass of water, and you'll still be fine. I mean, if you're at 5,000 or 6,000 meters and you're out walking all day in the mountains and trekking and exerting yourself and sweating, and being kind of exposed to those kinds of elements, and you don't drink a glass of water, by 6 p.m. you might be dead.
Mm.
And city folk don't understand that, and they really need to be aware of that, and if they're not willing to adhere to some pretty basic rules, they shouldn't be out in the mountains.
Mm. I agree with you. It's a massive culture change for people, I think, when they go away. I think a lot of accidents in the outdoors can be spared if people are more aware of their own ability and their own physiology and how it all works.
Exactly.
So you've obviously got a magic formula for producing great episodes of either tough rides or extreme treks, or one of your another series I've seen you've got coming up called Handmade. What is that storytelling formula that you use to try and produce the best episode ever?
Well, I'm very lucky. I have broadcast partners that give me a lot of freedom with the storytelling that we choose to pursue, and they don't get too strong-handed with oversight, and I really appreciate them for that. And with the adventure shows, we like to try to tell a full story that starts with me and my own reflections, but also, include as much of the natural environment as possible. And then also as much of the local culture and the people around us. Like, in Papua New Guinea, for example, we did the 110-kilometer trek across the Kokoda Trail, and we had like 19 porters or 18 porters. And on camera, I didn't want to be the kind of guy who's like, well, we're out here alone in the middle of nowhere. No, like, we have 19 porters and they're carrying all our camera equipment, and we put the porters on camera and we talk to them every day, and they were part of the show and part of my team. And my relationship with them was wonderful. And they were all local, and some of their relatives had fought in the war that we were talking about in World War II, and on the sides of the Australians against the Japanese. So, I think that you just, people are the best subjects for storytelling. And I think, and then of course nature just offers us the beautiful backdrop. So we always try to find really human-led stories, and then of course we'll have the extreme natural elements around us.
Mm. What's the story that you haven't been able to tell yet, but you really want to tell? The one that's hidden away.
Well, the ones that are hidden away are usually hidden away by extreme cost. and that's where my frustration lies, is really just fundraising. I'm just constantly fundraising. Right now I'm doing a series called Expedition Asia for Discovery Channel, and that's a show I was pitching last year, and then it got greenlit, and it's 10 episodes, and we've done 8. But right now I'm in between doing that show. I'm pitching for next year. So I've got another Tough Rides I've got to pitch for. I've got another Extreme Trek season I've got to pitch for. And we're just constantly kind of fundraising. And the stories that for me would be really interesting are, kind of the most, some of the most epic locations that I would like to film in are places like Antarctica, or places like the Arctic region, or places like Greenland. where nature is kind of at its most extreme, because I'm curious to see what it looks like, and then I'm also curious to see how I can physically and mentally and emotionally deal with that kind of isolation and those kinds of difficulties, and then hopefully bring my crew along with me so that we can tell some story about that part of the world. So those are things that I still really want to do, but at the moment we're prohibited by some of the great costs of filming in those regions.
Yes, especially Antarctica. I've looked at going there many times, and it gets flipping expensive very quickly.
Yeah, and you can imagine like bringing 200 or 300 kilograms of camera equipment, or things like that, with extra baggage, and even needing porters or something like that. Like, it's just not possible. It's just ruthlessly expensive.
Crazy. So, how do you manage all this? Riding a motorbike, doing photography, telling stories, going up hills, pitching to raise funds for a next series. How on earth do you manage all that with one human being and one life, only 24 hours a day?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of friends. It's like I really like working, and I really like being able to tell these stories. I really like being out in the field. I I'm really at home when we're in production, and then in my downtime, I love being able to talk about the shows and speak to people like yourself, who has their own audience, and be able to introduce my work to them. And I do a lot of live events, and actually, coming up with new ideas and coming up with these new great adventures, and then being able to try to pitch them and bring other partners on board is hard and challenging and exhausting, but it's very rewarding. And then when you can somehow put all these pieces together and then still go out and make something, and then a year later have the chance to share it with a television audience, that's a dream come true. So it's hard to put all the pieces together, but that's the that's the fun bit in some ways, and doing all the research, and figuring out where you're going to trek and who you're going to meet and what's going on. It's just amazing, because if you want to live a life like this, or you want to be a storyteller, or you want to get paid to be a storyteller, I mean, there's a lot of people that want to do that, and it's a very kind of, on the outside looking in, it's a very glamorous life, but my God, the hours and the challenges and the frustration and the tears and the single malt whiskey and everything that goes into being able to wake up in the morning and go to bed at night, and pack your days as full as possible. It's very challenging.
So, what would your advice be? There's thousands of people out there, maybe people listening to this interview, who are courtesy of Instagram. They would like to go and make an Instagram account about their travels around the world and be a storyteller and live that lifestyle. What's your advice to those people for them to get started? Is there a way of getting started, or things to not do? I don't know.
I don't know either. I was doing a podcast here in Dubai last night, and the gentleman who was hosting this podcast last night, he was telling me, like, I have to broadcast my life 24/7, and I was like, no, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I've created a niche for myself, and I like to produce long form content, 46 minutes per episode of really high quality 4K content that is manicured, and the story is being told, and we have original music being composed, and we have drone footage, and we have sunsets and sunrises, and we take people on a journey, and I really like storytelling. I really like starting in a place and finishing a place, and taking the audience with me on these emotional highs and lows, and he was arguing with me that I should be putting up 100 Instagram pictures a day and be doing 100 Instagram stories a day, and bringing people into my life every moment. And I'm sitting here in my gym shorts, in my flip flops, in my hotel in Dubai, talking to you. It's kind of a private moment. It's a private moment. I don't need a camera on me at this stage. Like, there's enough of that. And so when people ask me, like, oh, like, can I get started with an Instagram account? Should I buy a video camera? Like, I just don't know. But the thing is once you start, you'll begin to figure out right away what kind of responses you get from people and which direction you should go in. Like, I write a column for the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. It's quite popular. I make my television shows. I make a few different television shows. I spread myself around to see, where I can find the most eyeballs and where I can get the most interesting responses from, and that's kind of how you learn how to build your own audience. And I think the worst thing that people can do is just not move forward. Like, some people just overthink themselves to paralysis. Some people are so afraid that it won't be perfect that they don't even do it. And to me, that's just ridiculous. You just got to start, and the start is always going to be messy. And then once you've got 1,000 posts, or once you've written 50 articles, or once you've done, 500 video blogs, then you'll start to realize where to go with it and maybe how to monetize it. But until you get there, and until you've made all the mistakes, unless you're an overnight sensation, which, it can happen to anyone, but I wouldn't bank on it. Then you really got to hone your skill and really, develop. And it takes time.
It's a luck isn't a success strategy, or something like that. Is what I heard the other day. If you really...
Yeah, it's not at all. And why would it be? I mean, if your strategy in life is to win the lottery as a business plan, then no one would invest in that.
No, that's a terrible idea. What's the odds for the lottery? 17 million to 1 or something like that.
Something like that.
It's crazy. It's interesting that you mentioned it there. You know who your niche is, you know who it is you're producing content for, and you know exactly what that content is. And I think that people actually need to go out and find that niche and keep being reflective and fine-tuning what it is they produce, like self-teaching, long enough, and they will find it. I just think that people often aren't that reflective or self-teaching, but they actually kind of carry on doing what they're doing. And if it doesn't work, they don't tweak it, adapt, and change. And then they say, well, it's almost impossible to achieve what somebody like yourself's achieved. But I'd imagine your learning's been immense over the past 20 years since leaving college and moving overseas.
Yeah, I think, I think there's something to be said for living in a constant state of discomfort. I think that if you want to live in a nice little soft bubble, you just keep doing what you're doing, and you're probably going to be fine, but you might not do what you want to do, or what you think you could do. But you'll be busy, and it'll probably all be okay. But if you really want to, create something for yourself, be an entrepreneur, or build a business, or build a, or make content, then, it's going to be really hard. And you've got to be kind of ready to go, for 8 or 10 years, and really fight, because it's going to be difficult. And I think that a lot of people just aren't willing to put in that kind of time. And I think that's great, because that's less competition for me, and it's less competition for other people who are in this business. And there's already a lot of people to compete against, and we don't need more. So if you're not up for it, great. If you are up for it, then we'll see you in the field. But you hope that the people who do come in to the business, or do want to compete, come in and want to play the long game, because I think everyone wins when there's great content, being created, and the more great content makers we have, the better. But only, I really hope that the people who come in for the right reasons, and come in to play the long game.
Cool. What's your we have thousands, and this episode will probably listened to by over 50,000 people, I would guess. What's your biggest piece of advice to outdoor enthusiasts out there? If you had one gift that you could give them that allow them to get more out of their weekends or evenings or Wednesday mornings, what would it be?
Well, in terms of content creation, or just in terms of like being outside and loving and being outside? Because those are, sometimes the content creation can get in the way of just being outside and enjoying it. So it's a fine line you gotta walk.
So how do you navigate that fine line?
I work all the time, so I don't really take vacations, and I don't just go out into nature for fun. I've never climbed a mountain. I've never done a trek, and I don't really go out on motorcycle rides unless we're filming and making something happen. And my my happiness and my comfort level is filming and being in production and talking to the camera and bringing my audience to places that they might not have the chance to go to. And I've come to terms with that. That's my life. And I don't feel like I'm missing out. I don't feel like, oh, if I came to this place by myself, I would have a more authentic experience. I've kind of removed that opportunity from my world. I'm there to film. I'm there to tell stories. I'm there to make content, and that's my life. And I've really kind of grown to accept that. And now that I've grown to accept it, I think that, traveling and doing all these things on a full-time basis is much easier because I don't feel torn. I mean, I think a lot of people are like, oh, put the camera away, let's just enjoy the sunset. No, you got to film the fucking sunset because there's going to be 100,000 people or 1 million people who are going to watch this TV show, and that's the sunset that they tuned in to watch because they've had a terrible day at work and they're tired of watching the news. And for 46 minutes, it's our job right now to take them somewhere else. And that's very much the mentality that we go to work with every day.
That's cool, because it's a struggle for most people who engage in the outdoors and will watch what it is that you film, as they've had battling that tear between a 8 to 5 job and the desire to get in the hills, get on the river, go on the sea. I don't know, whatever it might be for them, is a massive challenge. And I guess not everyone's brave enough to do it as a full-time thing, but also finding that time for people can be immensely hard.
Well, I think you have to. I think for anyone listening out there, and I do talks like this at universities, and I do talks like this at film schools and at photography centers and stuff like this. I mean, I was very fortunate at a young age to figure something out, and I figured out that if I want to live in a big Western city like New York, Toronto, Canada, where I was born, or Los Angeles, or San Francisco, or Vancouver, I'm never going to fulfill any of the entrepreneurial, travel, storytelling dreams that I have. Because the cost of living is so high, and you're going to get into relationships, and you're going to have children, you're going to have debt, and all those things. And I'm sorry to say this, but all those things are going to just slow you down. So I know there's some people who go off and get married and have kids and bring their kids on these wonderful journeys around the world, and they're Instagramming. My hat goes off to those people, but I could never do it. I mean, but at a very young age, I moved to China, and I was able to have roommates in China, and I was able to teach them English to cover some costs, and I was able to live incredibly cheaply. And my cheap living costs allowed me to be more creative, to take more risk, try to do more interesting things, and that eventually led me to having a career in exactly what I wanted to do. And it was only because I could live in China for $500 a month instead of living in New York for $3,000 a month, and then having no freedom. And plus, I was in China. I was already where I wanted to tell stories. So when I go, like I give talks in New York City and in Los Angeles at film schools, and I tell all these kids, I'm like, when you guys are done film school, where are you going to live? And they're like, oh, I'll stay in LA, or, oh, I got a place in Brooklyn or something like that. I was like, go to Jakarta, go to Mumbai, go to, go to Riyadh, don't go to a war zone, because that's dangerous. And I wouldn't ask anyone to do that. I mean, that has to be something specifically that you want to do, but go someplace where your living costs are very reasonable. And go to a part of the world that people haven't seen enough of, and if you really want to be a storyteller and you really want to have a career in it, then it has to be this combination of managing your daily life costs, and then being near to where the stories are.
Again, I guess that was your niche for China. Circling back to when you originally went there, is that it was, I suppose, it still is greatly unknown about by the people. We don't know what really happens in China. It's just a big question mark up in the sky.
Yeah, which is very strange, because people have been reporting on China and telling stories about China for decades and centuries, and still we don't seem to have any real closer idea of what's going on in the country, or what's going on, with the management of the country. And I always find that just incredibly interesting. But
what is
yeah, I
going
think
on? What is going on in China that you think the rest of the world should know about but doesn't?
I think that the the terrible thing is, I think that a lot of people just who are really in charge of making policy don't haven't really visited China.
Hmm.
They haven't spent time there. They don't understand just how proud they are of what their country has accomplished over the last 30 years, and what the leadership has accomplished over 30 years. And even though they have their problems, and there's issues with the economy, there's issues with minority peoples there, there's issues with some freedoms that exist there. You have an issue right now with Hong Kong. But the people in China are still incredibly proud of their country. So when major U.S. brands or U.S. politicians speak out, it just you're never going to sway the Chinese people to kind of go against their country. I don't think that's ever really going to happen. And I just it's a little frustrating to watch people just continue to talk about China without really understanding some of these nuances.
Mm. Yeah, it's scary to think that the people who make the most important decisions in the world probably have no experience of what it is they're actually making decisions about. That's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I can talk about another experience where I was, I travel to Iran quite often. I've been to Iran a few times, and I love Iran, and I love the country, and the history and the culture of the people there is incredible. But the government is doing all this crazy stuff, and the government's causing all these problems in the region. But the people, are not representative of the government, and they're, when you sit down and have a coffee or a tea with an average Iranian, or you visit some historical site and you get to listen to the people talk about their history, it's very powerful. So I feel like we live in a world now where there's so much nationalism and so much pomp and ceremony around being, supporting your country, and having these government leaders kind of say this, publicly say crazy stuff, but it doesn't always necessarily reflect the local people, and it shouldn't stop us from wanting to travel and learn and understand about the world around us.
It's funny, as the world gets metaphorically smaller, how nationalism to try and make the world bigger again seems to be coming up to put up bigger barriers. I was going to say bigger walls, but I don't want to step into politics. But it's funny how that, as we get drawn closer together by the World Wide Web and air travel being so affordable, that people seem to want to put their flag in the ground even more than they have done previously. It's bizarre.
It's I really feel like we're going backwards. These last few years, I think that whether it started with Trump or things like Brexit, or I just feel like the world is starting to close its doors to other people, and this wonderful kind of globalization and this mobility that we've been enjoying. And as for someone like me, as a frequent traveler, and who's someone, I write a column for the South China Morning Post called The Nomad. I mean, I definitely embrace my freedom to move and to travel and to be welcomed in other countries and stuff like that. And I feel like that's starting to not be as progressive as it was. I feel like there's some pretty serious regression coming in. And as people kind of get more nationalistic and more fearful of outsiders, which I hope is a trend that will reverse itself soon, because it's definitely not the future, but it seems like it could be our short-term future.
Mm. What do you think, if you were to predict the future of the outdoors, or the TV industry in the outdoors, or even book writing about the outdoors, what would you predict some of the future things that we're likely to experience are going to be?
Well, I think we're going to be pretty, I hope there's going to be a huge backlash against reality television. That would be really wonderful. I think that a lot of the television that is put out in the world is sensationalist, and full of a lot of staged sequences and staged emotions, and it's just triggering people into watching the shows and getting ratings, in which case there's more advertising dollars and things like that. But I really feel like it's dumbing down the world and dumbing down our populations and leaving people with less instead of more. And I'd really like to see a shift back into more of like the content. I work with the BBC. I'm very lucky, but and I'd really like to see more kind of BBC style content where people go back to television to educate themselves, and people go back to television to learn about the world, and people go back to television to understand the people around them, and also foreign cultures and foreign lands. And Sir David Attenborough's been doing this for what feels like centuries, but it's only been decades. And I just hope that people, they stop watching, 7 people living in one house fighting with each other and sleeping with someone else's girlfriend. And I hope we can, move on past that and start remembering that we live in an amazing planet and a beautiful world, and we're very lucky, and we got to take care of it. And one of the best ways to take care of it is to go out and sustainably enjoy it, and actually have some wonderful experiences out in nature. Because then when you come back to the city, I think you'll make more conscious choices, and you'll realize that what's out there, where we are now, is kind of worth protecting. And I hope that the content that we can create, and I definitely try to do this in my show, that the content that we try to create is definitely putting nature and the fun that you can have, and also the responsibility we have to keep it all together at the forefront.
That's cool. It's interesting that in business marketing terms, they say that people have like a 3-second attention span, and unless you can satisfy their urge within 3 seconds, you're never going to market something effectively. And then you shift to the other end of the paradigm, which is the world's most listened to podcast, is I think the Joe Rogan show, and he specializes in 2 to 3 hour long podcasts, interviews. And that shows that obviously there's a mismatch somewhere in the world, and people are ready and wanting to have long form, relatively high quality content to engage with. There's definitely a want and need out there. Otherwise, Joe Rogan's podcast wouldn't be listened to.
Yeah, and you know what though? I mean, I'll say this. Joe Rogan's an amazing human being. From his Ultimate Fighting days to his stand-up comedy days to acting to his podcast. I mean, he's a incredibly interesting individual who has a lot of variety. He has a huge variety of opinions and ideas, and his podcast is fantastic. But I think 1 million people listen to each episode or something like that, which is staggering. But at the same time, it's also not for everyone. And I think that podcasting is great because the people who want long form engaging content can find it there. But the problem with television these days, and I'm speaking specifically about traditional linear broadcast television, is that they don't shoot at the audience with a sniper rifle the way Joe Rogan does. Joe Rogan doesn't even care what his audience is. He just does what he does, and people find him. But broadcast television, they use shotguns to pepper, as many people as they can, and so that they're just trying to do too much with too little. And I think that's where this kind of sensationalized content or celebrity driven content is really making the world in some ways a dumber place. And it's a bit rough to watch. It's really rough it's really terrible to to visit some place, for example, in the United States, and say that, I live in Dubai, and they're like, oh, isn't that where Saddam was? And I'm like, really? Like, that's Iraq. Like, or be able to speak about, visiting the guerrillas in Uganda, along the border with the Congo there, in the Bwindi National Park, where I filmed an episode of my Extreme Trek show. And they're like, oh, Uganda, wow, like that's right next to Thailand. Like, wow, did you go to the beach? And I'm like, no, like Uganda is East Africa. Like, come on, people. Like, let's open up a map. Let's realize that there's a world beyond where we live currently, and let's engage with it, because we'll all be a little less dumber, and we'll all treat each other a little nicer, hopefully. And that's That's what content is supposed to do, I think. And I think right now we're just in this vortex of vomit.
I agree. And people are bombarded with local content the entire time, especially from the news networks and everything else. It's all very much within our borders, and anything outside of the borders gets like a second glance later. So I think people just like they look inwards to their own country far more than they maybe have done. It's interesting. So
I think local content is very important, but I mean, you want to know what your neighbors are doing. You want to know what's happening down the street. You want to know what's happening in your community. And I think that's all just really important, but there should also, I mean, I think it's a little bit of like the Steve Jobs mentality. Steve Jobs didn't tell, he didn't wait for people to tell Apple to make an iPod or an iPhone. He made it and then delivered it to the people. Like, I think there's some element here where content creators have to say, okay, look, like we've gone too far in this other direction. Let's bring back the quality and let's start showing people, what we can do with their attention spans, and instead of waiting for them to it's never gonna go bottom up. Like the people who are the great content creators of this world have to take it on as a responsibility to start, creating responsible content again at some stage.
And so, is that creating content that will capture the attention of your sort of soap opera type viewers? That is real enough, but it captures them. I don't know.
Maybe, hopefully,
because that seems like that's the paradigm shift. Is how can you go and put something about Iran in front of somebody who normally watches whatever it might be soap opera, and get them to prefer Iran to the soap opera?
Yeah, it's true, but you never know until you do it, and you might be pleasantly surprised. One of my episodes came out last week about Papua New Guinea, and people didn't even know where Papua New Guinea was, and then they figured out that there was a war there, and I don't know, if the show brought them to Papua New Guinea or I brought them to Papua New Guinea. I don't know what brought them to the channel that night, but the people who were there were surprised. And the people who, didn't turn the channel and stayed with it learned something new. And, people write you on Twitter and write you on Instagram all the time. And they're just like, wow, I had no idea the World War II was happening in Papua New Guinea and that Australia was so close to being overtaken by the Japanese, and how this jungle trail was, all that was stopping the Japanese from launching, attacks into Australia. And if we can bring people these kinds of stories through my adventure trekking or doing a trip through the jungle or something like that, that's really a dream come true. I mean, not every episode that we do has a historical significance like that. I mean, some episodes are just fun, but we definitely try to make them an educational experience where there's, some cultural interaction and engagement involved, for sure. You know what? This is the thing. This is what really drives me crazy. I don't know if this is the right platform, but I hate the way, I think the trend right now that is so dangerous, and this has to do with all the nationalism being built up and we're better than you kind of mentality, is that it's driving so much fear into everyone. And I studied politics in university, so I have maybe some unique or dark opinions about this. But when you drive fear into everyone just wants to stay home and consume. And then you're going to have a bunch of, brain dead people who are just going to be stuffing things in their mouth and buying stuff they don't need. And what we really need to do is to let people know that the world is a big and beautiful place. And instead of buying the third car or renovating the house for the 7th time, save some money, go to a different part of the world, experience a new culture, travel someplace where they don't speak your native language, and understand, a different way of life. And you're probably going to be a better off person for it. And I don't know when that transition is going to happen, but this whole kind of fear mongering, the news is making everyone scared. Every time you turn on the television, it's making people scared. And I stopped reading the news. Like, I was a news guy forever. I was part of the complex that made the news. I did that for like a decade of my life. And now I can't watch it, or I can't read it. I can't stomach it, because it's just fear and headlines that are clickbait. And not everyone in this world has traveled or is sophisticated enough to realize that not everything you read is true, and not everything you read is there for your benefit, and this is just perpetuating fear about everything, and I think that this is the greatest demise of this kind of constant media flow that we exist in.
Well, there's two things going on. One is that the traditional news outlets are losing grip of who they thought their audience was, because their audience now can get the same or better information from 15 million other places across the whole World Wide Web. So they have to go and sexify it. But the other part, which saddens me really, is the world is a far safer place than we are led to believe. I did a lot of kayaking in the Himalayas about 18 years ago, and I was there when the Civil War was on in Nepal. And there was, Home Office, what are the things they put out there? Home Office warnings about don't travel here, don't do that, etc., etc. And we were there for 5 months, and I can honestly say, other than one minor altercation, like you'd never know there was a civil war on.
Right.
And yet, if you read the news, you were to type in Nepal soldiers into Google back then, you'd have said, right, that's fine, I'll just stay in bed today.
Yeah. And what happens then, like when we just stop caring about other people or other parts of the world, and it's it's just a vicious circle where people just end up knowing the people that live around them, and they don't have a care about anyone else, and that's terrible.
It is. Right, I've got some quick fire questions for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Beer or wine?
Is whiskey an option?
Whiskey. Okay, whiskey.
I'm a single malt whiskey from Scotland. That's my thing. So I don't drink beer or wine.
Any favorite whiskey?
I don't want to go out and say specifically any kind of brands, but I'm very partial to Speyside Scotland whiskey or the West Isles. Anything that's single malt, anything that's very pure, very clean, 3 times distilled, these kinds of things really turn me on, and it always has a clean finish.
Awesome. What was the last bottle that you finished?
I had a Glenfiddich 18,
nice.
which was very nice. But I've also enjoyed some Macallans, Balvanys, Taliskers, Aberlour. Lagavulin. If you're looking for dry, I like it all. I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Have you tried Highland Park?
Yes, Highland Park is lovely. Are you a Highland Park connoisseur?
I am. Highland Park's one of my favourites. I circumnavigated the UK in a kayak. Crikey, about 14 years ago now. We spent a lot of time going around Scotland because the weather was atrocious, and so we spent probably as much time kayaking as we did camping, going around Scotland, and then camping ultimately turned into the world's largest distillery tour.
That sounds perfect. That sounds lovely.
Yeah, if you're into doing, I suppose you record stuff for yourself, but maybe an extreme trek, you can canoe down the whole of the Spey River through Speyside. You could do it as a trip, camping on the bank of the river for over 7 days, and pretty much visit 2 distilleries a day if you're that way inclined.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm gonna have to talk to my team and put that on the list.
I think that would be if you want extreme whiskey tasting series or something like that. And if you want a guide, I'll happily come along and show you around. What was the last?
That's it perfectly.
What was the last book that you read?
The last book I read was I'm rereading a lot of Hemingway. So I've been reading. I did For Whom the Bell Tolls because I grew up. Oh, did I lose you there for a sec?
No, I'm still there.
Hello.
Hi there. Still here.
So I've been rereading a lot of my old Hemingway books.
Cool. Anyone in particular?
For Whom the Bell Tolls, which was always one of my favorites. I've always held people, Ernest Hemingway in high esteem because I thought that he was kind of a man's man back in the day, and always interested in what was going on, always being at the forefront of storytelling, and of course writing beautifully. And um, he's always kind of been one of my storytellers of choice, I suppose.
Cool. How do you like to live your life, fast or slow?
Yeah, when I'm in the cities, I like to live it fast, but when I'm up in the mountains, I like to live it slow. So I think, I'm always waiting. When I'm in the cities, I'm always kind of just waiting to get out to the next adventure. So, but once I'm out there, I like to walk, and there's no better feeling in the world than just walking through epic landscapes. And it's very slow moving. It's methodical. It's meditative. It's beautiful. So fast in the cities and slow when I'm out in the field.
Good job. And what's your biggest piece of learning from the outdoors?
Yeah, that nature always wins, and we are pretty insignificant as a species. So, when nature wants to turn the table on you, you better be ready for a fight, and you have no control. So it really humbles you and teaches you to, know your place in this world.
I used to work with a lot of at-risk young people in the UK who've at risk of criminality or whatever else. And we used to take them into the outdoors because it's a great equalizer. It's completely fair and unfair at exactly the same time. If it's going to rain, everybody's going to get wet. It doesn't matter whether you're the richest or poorest person; we're all going to get wet. It's very powerful.
Absolutely, the great equalizer. I like that.
Yeah, it doesn't care. And where's your favorite location in the world? The place that you could just go back to over and over again?
I'm still very partial to China. I'm very partial to some of the mountains in Western China, the regions along the borders with Tibet and stuff like that. Just feel very at home there. The people are wonderful, and just being up at that kind of high altitude is always a dream come true. And it's very peaceful because the people there are very peaceful, and it's very relaxing, and very safe. It's a place I always like to go back to.
Western China, cool. Awesome. And so what next for Ryan Pyle? What's the next series of adventures or stories to tell?
So you're catching me just in between. I was in Thailand last week doing an episode of Expedition Asia. So we were there for about 2 weeks filming. I've been in Dubai for a few days. I fly to India tonight. We're off to our next episode in northern India. So then after that, we've got a bit of time off. I've got a big event in Taiwan, and then we're going to be filming in Hong Kong for a bit. And then December, we'll be in Saudi Arabia doing some stuff. So yeah, we're just constantly moving around and telling stories about as much of the world as we can, as much of the world as our partners will let us.
And what's the barriers with that? Is there parts of the world that your partners don't want you to touch?
No, but I mean, sometimes you could do a show with like someone like Discovery Channel Asia, and they'll just ask you to travel around in Asia. Sometimes you'll do something with the BBC, and they'll ask you to do something globally. Everyone has their own agendas, and then if you want to stay busy and you like what you're doing, then you can bend and work with everyone. And if you want to hold a tight line and say I don't want to go here and I don't want to go there, then you might have more free time. But I really like being busy, and once we sort out all the locations and the things to do, the editorial kind of style or content, I do have quite a bit of freedom over. I really like if you have the chance, if there's listeners out there, if you have the chance to watch some of my shows, they're very different than a lot of the stuff that's on TV. I mean, a lot of the trips are very slow. The music is very important. The landscape is, beautifully on display. And we always go deep into the culture. And if you think that I'm going to be the presenter that's going to talk to you for 46 minutes straight, you're wrong. There's a lot of opportunity to reflect. Both, as a viewer, as an audience member, about just the parts of the world that we're traveling through. So it's a little bit more slow and methodical than most television, and I hope that people have the chance to not only watch it but also understand that we're trying to take our content in a totally different direction.
Yeah, and all your content's available on Amazon, Vimeo, and places like that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And if they go to ryanpyle.com, you'll go to my television page there, and there's direct links to all the content.
Cool, and I'll put some direct links to the content in the show notes as well, so people can just go and flick down there and go and find you. I'd like to hand the floor over to you, and give you 60 seconds to tell the world something that you believe they should know. Anything at all that will make a profound difference in their world. What would you like to share?
That the world is big and beautiful, and there's a lot to be explored. And, it's our job to go out and enjoy everything that the world has to offer. So if that means consuming a little less at home, if that means trying to save up a little more, if that means, holding back on some big purchases, then you should be doing that, because I guarantee that travel is the only thing you'll spend money on that'll actually make you feel richer. And money is a commodity. We all need it. It's finite, but time is really our most valuable resource that we have. And don't waste your time. And I've chosen to use my time to explore the world and meet people, and I haven't regretted one day of it. And I hope more people can have the chance to also do something similar, because I think it's very enlightening. And I think that when you travel, you learn not only about the country that you're traveling in, but you also learn a lot about yourself and how you interact with people. And I think you'll come back a better human being.
Cool, thank you. And Ryan, other than your website, is there anywhere else where people want to come and find out more about you, they can hunt around? You're on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff?
Yeah, at Ryan Pyle, RyanPyle, at Ryan Pyle on Instagram, at Ryan Pyle Twitter, at Ryan Pyle Facebook. I'm Ryan at Ryan J Pyle on YouTube, where you can catch a lot of the clips and stuff like that. And then, of course, just go on to Amazon.com or Amazon Prime or whatever, and you'll see I have a lot of books. I wrote books about all my motorcycle journeys: Tough Rides China, Tough Rides India, Tough Rides Brazil. I've published 2 photography books, both about my photography career in China, which was, amazing and a wonderful opportunity. And there's a lot of content out there for people who are looking, to take a different path or kind of understand a different part of the world. So I'm hoping that people can, find the content that they're interested in and consume it and interact with it as they wish.
Awesome. Cool. Ryan, thank you very much for your time. Everybody out there should go and check out Tough Rides, Extreme Treks, and Ryan's website, where you will find out more TV series and episodes coming up in 2020. But for me, Ryan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful to be able to chat.
That's a pleasure.